And now for Chapter 11, and it is entitled Worn Out. Officially, it had been 2 weeks since I started my after-school tutoring session with Miss Witherspoon, and things aren't getting any better. It's not that I've gotten dumber, mind you. It's just that this whole mess has consumed my life. Even good things turn to ashes in my hands. For example, Mom and Dad, despite generously giving me timeouts for any act of violence or any act that could be remotely perceived to have an intent of violence towards my sister, have noticed that my life is becoming forfeit. So last Friday night, before family worship, they called me into the living room and gave me a present. It was small in size, wrapped in metallic blue paper with a yellow bow. I could tell Mom wrapped it because when Dad wraps a gift, they look like they've been put through the garbage disposal. I thanked them and tore it open. It was an iPod video. My excitement was short-lived, however, when my doting parents, informed me that they had already programmed several educational MP3s onto it, thanks to Miss Witherspoon. Mom showed me several fun songs about geography, the presidents of the United States, and memory verses my dad had recorded himself using the microphone on his laptop. There were even documentaries from the Discovery Channel about whales, outer space, and the environment, my favorites. Well, what do you think, Pete? Can I put some other stuff on this? I asked pleadingly. Like what? Asked Mom. Games, normal music, or maybe a movie like Transformers? We can talk about that after the contest, Peter, said Mom, a little annoyed at my ingratitude. But for now, this is a tool to help you do well. Listen to it when you ride in the car, just before bed, or I'll just leave it on all the time. I don't have a life anyway, so it's not like I would miss anything. Peter, this costs a lot of money. Don't be ungrateful, scolded Dad. Why? I asked. Will you take it back? I don't think it was so much the question that got me sent to my room as the hopeful smile I was wearing when I asked. I spent the weekend being grateful by listening to my iPod instead of playing baseball with the neighbor kids or watching television. The only upswing was when I snuck the iPod into Sabbath school and watched my whale documentary instead of listening to Miss Cracklesnap lecture on the evils of television. I tried to keep it hidden, but at some point I began noticing the uncanny resemblance between narwhals and Mrs. Cracklesnap. I stared vacantly at her and her pointy nose, which she took as a signal that I had a question. Peter, do you have a question? Peter? Peter? Truth be told, I didn't know she was talking to me. I couldn't hear a word she said. I thought she was talking and waving at someone else. Only when she made her way over to me did I realize that I was the object of her focus. Pappenfuss, are you watching television when I'm teaching the lesson? I stalled, trying to remove the earbuds nonchalantly as possible. I was just studying. Wrong answer. The pastor's son is studying on the Sabbath? Here we go. And in my class? Well, aren't you teaching? I responded. Am I supposed to be learning? You, she began in the usual scolding tone, are supposed to be learning spiritual things, not watching movies produced by Hollywood. Once again, the junior class was spellbound by another classic interaction between Peter Paul Pappenfuss and Miss Cracklesnap. Even Jennifer Langley, who chews gum on Sabbath morning as frequently as she breathes, paused her masticating in anticipation of how I would respond. I couldn't let such restraint go unrewarded. I'm watching a nature video about whales, I roared. Didn't God create whales? I don't care what you're watching. Shut it off and give it to me until the end of class. Fine, I said sweetly with a sprinkle of sarcasm as I wrapped the earbuds around the iPod and handed them politely to Miss Cracklesnap. I suppose I can just watch you. You're as big as a whale. That's how I arrived at the end of class before anyone else. A raucous chorus of laughter followed me out the door as I made my way to visit my parents' class once again. As per usual, they were not happy to see me. My dad even threatened to send me to Mary's class if I couldn't act my age. After church, we went to the Sanfords for lunch. They live on a farm about 20 miles outside of town. Mom and Dad tried to lecture me about Sabbath school on the way there, and Mary just sat quietly and shook her head at me. But I was too busy watching the whale documentary to pay any attention. Maybe this iPod wasn't such a bad gift after all. The Sanfords have several horses on their farm and even more horse poop. You can smell it when you get close to their home. I'm amazed Melissa doesn't smell like a horse when she comes to school, considering how obsessed she is with them. I hope that's not lunch I smell, I said as we pulled into the gravel driveway. Peter, so help me, you will not act up while we are here, Dad said. Just trying to make a joke, I said, putting away my iPod. Your sense of humor is crass and rude, said Mary, jabbing a finger into my arm. Mary's touching me, I announced triumphantly. Peter, please, said Mom. You're too old to play that game. Perhaps, but apparently Mary isn't, because when I grabbed her finger and flung her hand back onto her side of the back seat, she reported my behavior to Mom, which landed me a 30-minute timeout upon our return home. Lunch was all right. It didn't taste like horse droppings. Mercifully, Melissa was tolerable, and we walked around the farm a bit looking at horses. I have to admit, they are impressive up close, and they reminded me of the documentary on the Mongols, which was what I would be watching next after the one on Wales. The preview for the Mongol documentary showed war horses racing towards battle, and I imagined myself being able to ride a powerful horse that fast. I wondered if these horses were battle-worthy. This is my horse, Peter, said Melissa, leading me to the last stall in their stable. The horse was all brown with a solitary white patch on its chest. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence, and the musty, warm scent of hay wafted into the stall. It was huge, and I couldn't believe Melissa could ride it. Wow, I said, patting the horse on the nose. It looks like a war horse. Do they still make armor for horses? How fast do you ride him? Melissa's nostrils flared. Her name is Sally, and we only canter. And as far as armor, we only put ribbons in her hair. Then she stomped off back to the house, leaving me in the stable. When she was out of sight, I leaned in toward Sally and whispered, If you were my horse, I wouldn't put ribbons in your hair, and we'd ride as fast as you wanted. Sally whinnied her approval. Today is Tuesday, which means it's the second time this week I've had to endure being stared at by students from other classes when I pass them in the hall. Their gazes are a mixture of pity and fear, as if, somehow, they come into contact with me. They might share in the blame when I go down in flames at the contest. And since I haven't ventured to answer any questions in class yet, my fellow classmates are becoming skeptical of whether my tutoring sessions are having any effect. The skepticism is bolstered by Lucas Snodgrass and his constant commentaries on my progress. Awful quiet today, Peter Paul Pappenfuss, said Lucas at lunch. Maybe you have too many thoughts in your head from tutoring, and they're pushing out your ability to remember how to speak. There was some nervous laughter. I really wanted to show Lucas how much my brain remembered how to speak, but as Lucas finished his insult, Principal Purvis walked into the cafeteria and came up to me. He had been doing this since Monday, accosting me in public places. Peter, how's the studying going? He asked. I wasn't sure if he really cared or if he was relishing some sort of personal victory. Sounds like you haven't been making much progress, if what Lucas says is true. Is it true? My face burned red hot. I could feel every eye in the cafeteria on me. I was so mad and frustrated I couldn't speak. I told you, cried Snodgrass, and several people laughed. I wanted to get up and run out of there, but since Mr. Purvis stood right behind me, I couldn't get up. He smiled and waited for the laughter to die down. Maybe we need to add some more time to your tutoring, Say another half hour. I was ready to burst with rage when Miss Witherspoon came to my rescue. She had been talking to one of the lunch ladies when she noticed our conversation. "Is there a problem, Principal Purvis?" He stood up hastily and smiled. "Not at all, Miss Witherspoon. I was just checking in with Peter to see how things were progressing." "He's doing just fine." The principal nodded and made his way back to his office, which was across from the cafeteria. When he was out of sight, Miss Witherspoon smiled at me. "Are you okay, Peter?" I sighed and nodded. "Good. Okay, class, clean up. It's time for recess." Recess found me on top of the monkey bars with Harley and Gretchen. Gretchen was telling me about a machine she had learned about that was supposed to help you learn while you sleep. "I'll do some more research, Peter," she said, pushing her big brown glasses up on her nose. "I'm not sure how much they cost, but maybe you could rent one." "Thanks, Gretchen. What I'd really like to do is punch Lucas in the face." "No doubt," agreed Harley. "That's one kid who could use a punch in the face. Sometimes it's the only way. But I've got some bad news, Peter. It wouldn't help your cause." "Why not?" "Well, I did some asking around with the sixth graders and found out an interesting fact about Snodgrass." Snodgrass was our new name for Lucas. We thought it captured his personality beautifully. What interesting fact is that?" asked Gretchen. Did you notice how Principal Purvis didn't reprimand him at lunch? Well, that's because he's the principal's nephew." I wanted to throw something as far as I could. "Spectacular," I muttered. "Maybe that's why both he and Lucas are on your case. You're already on Principal Purvis's bad side, and now you've stolen their chance to earn the school big money and be heroes at church." I smiled. "Ha! I should just embrace failure then. Squander the chance they want so bad. It could be satisfying." Gretchen shrugged and adjusted her glasses again. "I don't know, Peter. It might be, but wouldn't it be better to steal the glory for yourself? I mean, you could waste the chance, and they would hate you, and maybe even some other people would. But if you won, that would really shut them up, wouldn't it?" "Impressive," agreed Harley. "I guess so, but then there is the matter of me actually being able to win. How likely is that?" "It depends on how much you put in," said a voice behind me, nearly causing all three of us to fall off the monkey bars out of fright. It was Miss Witherspoon. "Teacher," said Charlie, composing himself, "how long have you been listening?" "Long enough to hear something about our principal having a nephew named Snodgrass." She smiled at us. It wasn't comforting. "Are you going to tell on us?" I asked. "I don't even know who Snodgrass is, so I really don't have anything to tell," she said with a wink, before walking to the school entrance and blowing the whistle to signal that it was time to go in. "She's all right as far as teachers go, Pete," said Harley, jumping down from the monkey bars and landing ungracefully on his rear. Gretchen and I laughed as we climbed down. "I guess she's okay," I admitted. "It's got to be hard being a new teacher and having to teach Snodgrass when his uncle is your boss," said Gretchen absent-mindedly as we walked towards the door. "I never thought about it that way," I said, and I meant it. That thought bothered me all through the rest of the day and through my tutoring session. After all, Miss Witherspoon hadn't planned for this to happen. She had to stay at school late too. She had to put up with the principal as much as I did. She had helped program my iPod and rescued me at lunch. A guilty feeling crept over me as I quietly completed my tutoring session on European geography. When Dad came to pick me up and asked how my day was, I tried a different response. "Pretty good. Miss Witherspoon really helped me today." I had never paid a teacher a compliment, especially when they were standing right there. It felt funny. Both my dad and Miss Witherspoon exchanged silent, shocked glances. "Well, time to go. Hey, Dad? Thanks, Miss Witherspoon." I walked straight out to the car, leaving them to talk to themselves, and turned my iPod on so Dad wouldn't ask any more questions about my day. But I was too lost in thought about the events of the day to notice the sound pumping through my earbuds. My contemplative attitude didn't last, however. Upon arriving home, I discovered that my sister had her two abnormal friends, Claudia and Chloe, over to spend the night. I got through supper all right because Dad dominated the conversation, telling everyone about my having a good day. It was embarrassing, especially when Mom leaned over and squeezed my hand a couple of times, beaming with pride. But it was better than listening to the sort of nonsense Claudia and Chloe always talk about. Believe you me, when my sister and C Squared get together, they come up with the weirdest stuff on the planet. One day, they all pretended to be kittens and only meowed, and when Mom asked them what they wanted for supper, instead of calling a psychiatrist as I suggested, Mom petted each one of them on the head and began offering suggestions for supper, eventually deciding on the suggestion that got the most excited meows. Another time, all three of them had a tea party right in the middle of the living room. The Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland would be hard-pressed to produce a crazier gathering of nonsense than these three conjured up. For one, they all took on fake English accents. Then they all drank tea from Mary's toy tea set. I couldn't decide which was more disturbing, the fact that there was no liquid in the cups because Mom doesn't trust even Dad to eat in the living room, or the fact that all three raved on about how good the tea was. To top it off, their mad tea party, blocked the view of the television. This evening, however, the name of the game was staring at me through my bedroom doorway. Every time I looked up, they would whisper and giggle. I let it slide twice before hollering down at Mom, "Mom, the unholy trinity is bothering me." That was the first time I had used the name to refer to them. I rather like it. I got it from a sermon Dad gave on a chapter in the book of Revelation. Mom was not impressed. "Peter, Paul, Pappenfuss, I don't ever want to hear you call them that again. In the corner with you." For a change of pace, Mom let me take the dictionary with me to the timeout, so no precious learning time would be wasted. I wondered how that memory machine Gretchen had talked about at recess. Not that it mattered. I'm not sleeping as well as I usually do. And since tomorrow night is health food night at the Pappenfuss house, I doubt that an empty stomach will make things any better.